Greetings. My name is ZORAYA CUESTA, and I'm the Director of International Students at Miami-Dade College North Campus. Today, we have the honor and the privilege to have the Honorable Andreas Siegel, Consul General of the Federal Republic of Germany in Miami, discussing the topic of climate change. This conversation is part of the Building Global Leaders International Environmental Series and in collaboration with the Center for the Advancement of Language and Cultural Studies in the Department of World Language. I do not want to conclude this introduction without thanking Professor León Palombo and World Language Chair Catherine Hanus-Zank for their participation, and especially Consul General Siegel for always taking time out of his busy schedule to enrich the life of our students, faculty, and staff at Miami-Dade College North Campus. Thank you all.
Hello and welcome. My name is Catherine Hanus-Zank. I'm Chair of the World Languages Department at Miami-Dade College North Campus.
And I am Professor León Palombo.
Climate change is an issue that is affecting our entire planet due to a concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere.
This is creating our sea levels to rise, extreme weather phenomena, and the shrinking of ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica, to name a few. However, there is something we can do to help alleviate this problem, and some governments have taken the matter into their own hands.
In 2016, 196 countries signed the Paris Agreement. Their aim was to reduce global warming. Germany was one of those countries. And today, we are joined by the Consul General of Germany, the Honorable Andreas Siegel, who will talk to us about climate change. Welcome, Consul General Siegel. It is such a pleasure having you with us today here at North Campus to talk about this very, very important issue that is affecting all of us. What is the mission of the Foreign Office in regards to climate change? What is its role, and what is Germany doing to address this issue?
Well, thanks first of all for having me for this important subject. Actually, in Germany, we've had discussions about the environment, about climate change for the past 4 decades almost. In Germany, I think we had worldwide one of the first green parties to emerge as a sort of a national factor on the scene. We've had a foreign minister who was a prominent representative of the Green Party between 1998 and 2004. And not to forget, Angela Merkel, her first federal government job was as an environmental minister. And she's a physician as sort of by profession. But by now, the topic environmental protection, climate change is a pillar of all party programs across the board, of all parties represented in the German parliament. So that's, starting with the Kyoto Protocol, which was prepared in the 1990s, but only went into effect in the mid-2005, I believe, was the first international effort to mitigate the effects of climate change, but there were no sanctions attached to this. So Germany was one of those countries to request more ambitious climate change protection and prevention. And that's why we were also one of the first signatories of the Paris Climate Accord in 2016. Knowing that this, in particular the sea level rise, is one of the major challenges of the coming decades, when you think that currently, if nothing more is done than we do currently, we will have probably a global warming of about 2.5 degrees centigrade by 2050, which could lead to a sea level rise in some areas of 5 to 6 feet, actually. And you can imagine the impact that you will have here in Miami Beach or on the coastlines in Florida, and even more so in Asia. I'll come back to that later maybe. But Well, it is clear that this is a global challenge. It's not just a national issue, but you can only sort of face this challenge by a global, international, multilateral effort. And that's why Germany is very active in the United Nations and also on the bilateral level with partnering countries to find mechanisms to promote awareness on the one hand of the problem, but also to create sort of stringent tools which make it possible to control this effect. And that's why every mission, actually, embassies and the consulates abroad, they are promoting this and partnering with academic institutions, with other players of the civil society to see what one can do to work together in this field.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Good morning, Consul General Siegel. As a follow-up to the climate summit in April, on June 22nd, a transatlantic climate bridge conference took place. Can you tell us more about the aim of the transatlantic climate bridge and the significance and meaning of this recent event?
Well, first of all, we welcome very much that the U.S. is back on the international arena on this global fight against climate change. And actually, this year, 2021, is a very important year in terms of climate protection, as we will have the COP26 in Glasgow in November, which as a follow-up to the Paris Agreement, where all the member or the signatory states have to demonstrate by which precise means they are going to get to their targets, which they have proclaimed, which they have declared. But so far, it's not very transparent on how the individual signatories are going to reach that goal. Now, we've had a very positive effect already generated by the global climate summit, which was called by President Biden, which had as an immediate consequence sort of a new bidding, international sort of new commitments in so far as to lower to increase the target in terms of climate neutrality. The Paris Accord foresees the aim of a climate neutral global emissions by 2050. Now Germany, and that has been confirmed by the climate summit and by the G7 now, which is new, by the European Union, which is new as well. And Germany, on top of that, has even furthered that, advanced that to 2045. So they have made even more commitments to that. Actually, this transatlantic climate bridge is an association of foreign ministries, environmental ministries of the United States, of Canada, and Germany, which has been founded already back in 2008 to promote not just governmental measures to cope with climate change, but also to involve private industry and the civil society because this has to be communicated on the ground in order to make it plausible and visible to everyone that this is a problem for all. So this June conference, which you had alluded to, which was initiated by our foreign minister, Mr. Maas, was to renew this process and to reinvigorate actually the action foreseen, in particular in preparation of the Glasgow COP26 in November, and to sharpen the tools actually of also transparency on how you get to those goals, and to see that with a common agenda of the three partners of this transatlantic bridge, we can also mobilize other countries, those who are actually the big emission problems in the world, including China, Russia, India, also Brazil, also Australia. These countries have not yet made clear commitments in that area. But in order to have a global impact, we need those countries on board as well. And that's why by forming this sort of little circle of motivated countries, we would like to draw the others on board as well.
Thank you.
In 2011, Germany decided to phase out its nuclear power plants. And now, approximately 10 years later, it has passed legislation to end coal-fired power generation by 2038. Quite ambitious. How will Germany compensate for the power that has been produced by nuclear and coal-fired power?
Well, that indeed is a big challenge. And there have been very heavy discussions in Germany on how to do this. And even before the abandonment of nuclear power, that was a big discussion in Germany as well, but influenced also by the strong standing of the Green Party. But as you said, just a year ago, or not even a year ago, the German parliament decided also to phase out coal, which, as you remember, is one of the key traditional industries in Germany. The forerunner of the European community was called the European Coal and Steel Community, founded in 1952, which actually combined the Ruhr area, the North Rhine-Westphalia, with some Belgium and some French coal production sites and mining areas. And the big issue is, of course, how to socially make this acceptable to the working families, the miners, and that's why a long phasing out period has been decided. I mean, the discussion is already like several, I would say 20 years old, but now by fixing this date of 2038, everyone now has a parameter where to orient, where to go to. And obviously, still the social measures have to be put in place to make this palatable to everyone. Now, as we have the German election coming up in September 26th, we have parliamentary elections. This topic is one of the heated points of debate because green energy has a cost, well, I forgot to say that by now, in comparison to 1990, we have now a share of renewable energy in Germany which is close to 50%, mostly wind energy and solar, but also some biomass and water. But coal still being around 22-23%, so that has to be replaced by 2038. And how can this be done? Well, it has a cost. It has a social cost. It has a sort of a replacement and investment cost in renewable energy. And the political parties are fighting about the degree of transparency on how they will explain to the electorate what the people will have to pay more. And one suggestion of the Green Party was to increase tax on gas for vehicles, which is not popular at all. And the other parties, although they do not have real alternatives, they're now sort of hammering on the Green Party, saying, well, you are not thinking sort of the people and you're not socially thinking, but they do not propose alternative solutions as yet. But they try to be a little bit intransparent on that. But we have another factor which is unique for Germany, and that is that in April we had an unprecedented Supreme Court decision which condemned the government to better implement the goal which is stated in the German Constitution, Article 20, to protect future generations. And that means, in concrete terms, that the German government had to review its climate protection goals and the different steps, 2030, 2040, 2050, which immediately took place after that judgment. So this is, I think, it's unique in the world that the Supreme Court condemns the government in order to sharpen its tools on the climate protection agenda. So that makes it even more difficult for any government to go behind these norms, or to go back that path. So there is only one way forward, which is to create more renewable energies and to find creative means of adapting to this. I mean, one of the one of the modern types of coping or incentives with this is the emission trade, where countries and companies can trade emission certificates. So there's the governments, or there are some by the EU, some national, some worldwide. There is a certain cap or a certain limit of authorizations, how many certificates you can get for producing energy with fossil fuels. But these norms and these standards, or these certificates, are being sort of reduced over time in order to reach sort of an incentive to produce renewable energies. But companies who are not yet able to produce renewable energy can buy certificates from other companies who are already doing more than required. So there is a sort of a flexible mechanism, a little bit market dominated exchange, which is a tool which not all the countries in the world have adapted yet. I think the US has an internal concept on that, but it's not linked to other countries on that. But it would be, I think, a good idea to have it as a global mechanism to have a more flexible exchange mechanism there. Now, Germany as such, I said, was very successful in reducing the sort of fossil energy in the past 30 years or so, since 1990, but there's still lots to be done. And one or two sectors that are particularly still concerned is the transport sector, where everyone agrees much more traffic needs to go from road to rail first. Then also the building construction sector is also one of those where from the beginning of a construction to the sort of the type of materials you use, the type of recycling mechanism that you have, and the type of energy equipment that you have, solar, for example, you can contribute also to these measures to mitigate climate change. So there is a whole lot of, a big spectrum of measures that is underway to attain these measures, which are very ambitious.
They sound very ambitious, but at the same time, it sounds as if the government, especially with a Supreme Court ruling, is saying we must protect the country and the people in the future, period.
At the same time, the experience with renewable energies is that it creates innovation. If you're forced to do that, you need to innovate, and actually it creates 3 times more jobs than fossil energies, as experience shows in statistics. And on top of that, Germany, knowing that Germany is sort of also an economic power, very much in international trade. So Germany has taken a big responsibility in financing international climate measures in the order of 4 billion or so recently to promote measures in the framework of the UN and so on. So that's definitely sort of Germany on that has not just a national perspective on that, but a global perspective.
CONSUL, as you know, in Florida, due to our coastal areas, we are specifically affected by climate change. What is your take on the visible effects of climate change, in particular sea level rise, and where do you see possibilities for the US and Germany to work together?
Well, thank you for that question. Yes, I think sea level rise is one of the most visible effects that we can expect. When we have already sort of rising frequency of hurricanes just going through Florida all the time. Actually, I have lived for a couple of years in Asia, in Ho Chi Minh City, where I could see basically the future for Europe and the United States, what's coming. because there you have regular flooding in the streets of 3 foot or more. Partially the airport cannot be used because of flooding, things like that, and that is current, that's not the future. And if you look at the statistics in Vietnam, for example, in particular southern Vietnam is extremely densely populated, and if nothing can be done until 2050, let's say, to mitigate the temperature rise, which experts say if we do nothing, we will have a temperature rise of 2.5 degrees centigrade. What we need to do is to reduce this to at least 2, if not 1.5 degrees. That's the sort of the goal, so that damages are not irreversible. If we have a 2.5% rise by 2050, that's an irreversible damage that we will have. And in Vietnam, large parts of southern Vietnam will be underwater, meaning that 20 million people will have to be displaced or will have to migrate elsewhere, and that's Ho Chi Minh City itself and the Mekong Delta in particular. So you have sort of additional questions. First of all, the humanitarian issue, of course, the economic issue. It will affect different areas, industrial areas, agricultural areas. You have to relocate people. It can also affect security issues because you will have some scarcity of certain goods. You will have possibly in other areas you have droughts actually as a sort of the opposite effect. So water will be a problem and a competition in the Near East, for example. It's a big reason for conflict, and how deep you are allowed to drive wells down to get to groundwater is a key issue to the survival of many people, and that is a cause for conflict. And that's why the United Nations Security Council and NATO are looking into these issues, because they are concerned this is a security issue actually at the end. First of all, it's humanitarian, of course, but it has broad implications. Now back to Florida. Now the impact will not be as big as in Vietnam, for example, but we have certain projections. There are a German researcher actually at FIU has developed an application where you can sort of measure with certain parameters, demographic development, density of buildings, temperature rise, etc. You can see that if we have this 2.5 degree rise of the temperature by 2050, the Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale will be several feet underwater by the year 2090 or so. So it's still far away from our perspective, but very real, because you can see it already what's happening in Asia. And so that's one concrete and specific area of cooperation. We have a number of research institutes in Germany which are specialized on measuring projections of this kind, scenario development, and what you can do to cope with that. And obviously awareness raising is a first thing. You have to do that on the government level, but also on the regional, local, municipal level, and you have to have a sort of a financial budget to do some preventive measures, or at least to cope with these things. Now, fortunately, I've seen the last budget for 2021 of Florida that was passed in Tallahassee 3 months ago, does foresee quite a good budget, about more than $1 billion for climate change adaptations of coastal communities. But many critics or experts say it's not enough, and it will not actually help prevent the developments, but it will just be able to patch here and there and cope with some existing effects that are already in place. So I think there is more which could be done. There are also questions to be asked according to, the architecture of the future. I mean, we have had this tragic collapse of the condominium in Surfside, and the reasons of that collapse are still not very clear, but it is, I think, apparent that being so close to the coast and being built in that area, it is prone to corrosion, increased and in comparison to other areas. And of course, the ground where it has been built, I think needs to have very high security standards in order to be safe for decades. Now that all this will be reviewed, but I think it's certain, and the effect of this will be a bigger debate on what kind of requirements do we need to have these coastal settlements. What kind of inspection intervals do we need? What kind of implementation control mechanisms do we need? Because all that is already emerging in the debate that it has been lacking on all these fronts in order. So how can we avoid this type of catastrophe? And there are a number of sort of academic institutions, I said, which are already cooperating here in Florida. We have some programs also by government where we can invite people, experts, to have exchanges here. And of course, events like this one, when we talk about these things, are also contributing to awareness raising about this topic.
Thank you. Indeed, very alarming data and information. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you, Consul General, for being here with us today in this discussion on climate change and for sharing all of the efforts that Germany is engaged in combating this very real issue, something that we all need to be aware of and to put our efforts toward in whatever way we can. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, and we look forward to welcoming you back to North Campus in the future for another occasion. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this very special presentation.